Welcome, everyone. My name is David Garza, and I'm the Development Director for Engagement and Advancement at Point Foundation. So let me start by thanking you for joining us for this evening's mentorship showcase. Tonight's discussion is both timely and exciting, as January is National Mentoring Month, and we have some great minds here to discuss what mentorship has meant to them, particularly in the context of their experience at Point. This is also a special showcase because it has been put together specifically for the Board of Trustees and also the Board of Directors. Our goal here is to keep our boards connected to the work we do, but more importantly, to keep them connected to our scholars and our alums. The pandemic has kept us physically apart for 2 years now, but we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to remain as connected as possible. Shortly, you'll be hearing from our featured scholars and alums on the topic of mentoring. But first, please allow me to introduce our moderator. Dr. Sarah Young is Assistant Professor and BSW Program Director in the Department of Social Work at Binghamton University, where she teaches courses on community and organizational practice. She is an alum of the Point Flagship Scholarship, earning her PhD from the University of Alabama in 2016 and remaining an active volunteer with Point ever since. She has served on the Scholar Selection Subcommittee since 2016. She's also served as the Scholar Subcommittee co-chair and has served as a mentor to a Point alum. She has lived and practiced social work in London, England, Mississippi, Alabama, and New York. She is thrilled to support Point's effort to spotlight mentoring, as she herself was a beneficiary of her mentoring relationship while a Point scholar. Welcome, Dr. Young.
Thank you so much, David. I am thrilled to be here. I love seeing the PowerPoint presentation with a lot of faces that I've known over the years, and just want to say welcome, and I'm excited to be a part of this conversation and honored to be asked. So it's my pleasure to introduce several folks who are joining me in conversation about mentorship tonight. And I'll start with Star Udenze. We're hoping Star is able to join us, and I'm hoping she can make the call. So Star Udenze is a nursing major at Riverside City College. Although Star initially struggled with her sexuality in middle school, when she reached high school, she joined the Gay Straight Alliance and created events to showcase LGBT youth for the first time in the district. Star's biggest project was the Seeds Showcase, which featured the art, spoken words, and talents of LGBTQ community, and which is now a tradition for her high school GSA. As a nurse, she plans to work to address the disparities in healthcare the LGBT community faces every day. No wonder Star is a Point scholar. Next, I am introducing Johannes Wilson, who is Star's coach. Johannes Wilson is also a Point alum who received his degree in nursing from the Massachusetts General Hospital Institute of Health Professions in 2017. After graduating from Williams College with a double major in psychology and women's and gender studies, he pursued a career in mental health as a research assistant at Massachusetts General Hospital, or MGH. From 2012 to 2018, Johannes was a lead organizer with Black and Pink, where he engaged in community education and activism in solidarity with LGBTQ people impacted by the prison industrial complex. After completing his nursing degree, Johannes began working at Howard Brown Health Center since then. He currently serves as the chief steward of the Nurse Union of Howard Brown Health, for which he was also one of the founding organizers. So welcome, Johannes. Next, joining us in conversation is Kyle Casteel. Kyle is a Point Flagship scholar studying policy studies and global and international studies at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. He is also a political worker in Indianapolis. After receiving the Point Foundation's 2018 Community College Scholarship, he successfully transferred from Ivy Tech Community College to Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis in spring 2019. While Kyle still consults with campaigns and candidates from time to time, he is currently focused on completing his dual bachelor's degree in policy and global and international studies. Kyle hopes to be the first person in his family to attend law school. So welcome, Kyle. Good to see you. And finally, we have Tim Bresnahan, who is Kyle's mentor. So Tim is also a Point alum who received his law degree from Chicago Kent College of Law. So Tim is the Senior Director of Gift Planning for the Chicago Community Trust, Prior to joining the trust, Tim served as the Associate Director of Philanthropic Advisory Services for Northern Trust. He is a member of the Chicago Estate of Planning Council, the Chicago Bar Association, and the Arts Club of Chicago. Tim is a past president of the Board of Directors for Rivendell Theater Ensemble. So welcome, Tim, as well. Great to see all of you here and joining us in conversation. All right, so we have a set of 5 questions that we'll ask just to get us started. And so the first question we have for you is, why do you think you were assigned to your mentorship pairing? And tell us what you have in common and how your differences might inspire growth. Who wants to get us started?
I suppose Tim and I could start on that one.
Let's jump in, Kyle.
I imagine that we were assigned as a mentorship pair because I've always been pretty focused on law school as my goal after my time as a Point Scholar, even back when I was pursuing the community college scholarship when we were first acquainted. So probably starting there. And then we also have our geographic proximity in the Midwest. But obviously our mentorship relationship goes a lot deeper than that. Tim and I have very similar senses of humor and kind of connect in our worldview in that way, and can kind of make light out of. I mean, you all heard that I won my Point Scholarship in 2019, so that was. It feels like it was a long time ago now in 2022, and the world was a lot different. And so it's been good to be able to lean on kind of that sardonic sense of the world that we share. I don't know, what do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I think we were joking, or I was joking earlier today, that we also got matched because we're both geriatric Point Scholars. I mean, we were not, when I was, 27, I think, when I was a Point Scholar, and Kyle, when you moved into the full program, you were the ripe old age of 26, maybe. And so we were super old. And so that was also why they thrust us together, because, we were grizzled and had like a worldview at that point. But we, joking aside, we came to it, I think, having lived, having a lived experience, having worked, having been independent for a long time. And I remember when I was matched with my mentor, when I was a Point Scholar, I specifically requested, so I didn't need another parent. I needed somebody that was going to be there to listen and help and understand where I was coming from. And I think that Kyle and I are well suited in that regard, that we, I think, came into the program, even though that was a while ago for me, at a similar place in our lives where we were looking for, guidance and friendship and mentorship, and not a dynamic that was going to be sort of like a parent role, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that really speaks to me. First of all, I didn't know there was a geriatric subgroup of Point. I started my Point journey at 30, so I have both of you beat, but can really relate to the fact that I think Point thoughtfully matched me with a mentor who, I wasn't looking for a parent either. I was looking for somebody who had that lived experience, and she was a total support for me too. So yeah. Thank you for sharing. And Johannes, I want to give you space to talk about you and Star and why you think the two of you were matched.
Thank you very much. Can folks hear me? All right. So actually, I've been checking in with Star a little bit. She's not feeling super well, but she said she is going to try to join. So we might be seeing her in the next few minutes. But as far as what I have to share about why I think we were matched, so I think we both are in the same profession of nursing, and she and I are also both from underrepresented groups within the nursing profession, not just because we're LGBTQ, but also being people of color. And we both are, Star goes to community college and will be going to nursing school through a dual enrollment with community college and a California state school. And I also have the experience of going to community college, but there is a difference in that I just went to community college to get some prereqs for nursing school because that was a career change for me. Whereas Star has known that she wants to be a nurse for some time, and that's been her goal throughout school. So, I think we have a lot of that stuff in common. And then there are some major differences in our circumstances too. But I think just one of the things that we both appreciate and get out of being paired together is just doing a lot of like mutual affirmation. I think like I didn't expect to receive so much kind of like praise for being a mentor from my mentee. That's certainly not like why I signed up for it, but it is really nice to like have that reflected back to me from someone that I'm trying to like provide guidance to. I think it's nice to just be seen for the ways that I'm trying to make a difference in the world and the ways that I'm trying to like be there and support another person. And that is, what I'm trying to do for Star. But I think it just is, indicative of her character that she wants to make sure that she thinks that I'm like being very supportive of her and doing a good job. And that's one of the things that like really sticks out.
That's really beautiful. Thank you, Johannes. Very inspiring as well. So I can tell you from my experience, when I was a Point Scholar, I did not have a professional overlap with my mentor. In fact, I remember being listened to by the folks who did the mentoring matches. And I said, having somebody who's bi-identified like me is really important to me, because at the time I was in Alabama, I was feeling pretty isolated. It was, you might imagine, it was difficult to find folks that, shared my identity. And so I was matched with somebody in Boston. And so she became sort of an accountability buddy for me when I was writing my dissertation. And then later as a mentor, I had the gift of being able to work with somebody who was a social work scholar as well. So I think there are all kinds of mentoring relationships that make sense, and really appreciate hearing about the three of you and your relationships. All right, so the second question, why do you think it's important for mentorship to be an essential part of the Point Scholarship Program? Kyle, would you kick us off?
Yeah, I'll be glad to start again. I think that something that I really lacked going into the experience as a Point Scholar was having kind of consistent adult encouragement in my life. I know that Tim talked about, and it's true, that I wasn't looking for a parent. I have two wonderful parents, but I was living on my own in the city, having moved away from home, and I was a bit older. And so I found myself in college as an institution is designed for 18 to 22-year-olds, and so a lot of the conversations that you'll have and a lot of the materials that you'll encounter are just speaking to lifestyle that was not like my own and needs that were not like my own. And so having mentorship built in as part of that Point Scholar experience, it gives you the support for having a conversation with an actual person, somebody who can be a sounding board for ideas and plans or problems. Especially going through the transfer experience, you can encounter so many problems and pitfalls that you just you want somebody to vent to, if nothing else. And so having that kind of developmental support in a person who's been through Point as a scholar, successfully graduated, it makes a big difference over the haul of a college education.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll plus one to what Kyle said, but also add, I think too, the mission of Point, I think, is to prepare us as members of the LGBT community for, career, for community service, for relationships, probably writ large. And part of what I learned after Point, when I went into the law and financial services to start, was that there's like mentorship built into a lot of corporate structures that can be that I wasn't aware of. You sort of have to participate in some way in order to sort of fit into like the mold that is created by some corporations. And having navigated the mentorship experience at Point, I feel like prepared me to be successful in my first experience in the corporate sector. but also helped me understand in reflection, like there's a difference too between mentorship and sponsorship. And being able to understand and apply that to at least the world that I was in was really helpful. That there can be mentors that are in my life that are safe spaces for navigating hard circumstances and getting affirmation or freaking out. And it's okay, like you sort of carve out those spaces even within the workspace to be able to do that, and understanding that can be somewhat different than the sponsors in your life who are there perhaps to serve a different purpose, and the spaces created within those sponsorships are different. So in reflection, when I got into sort of my post-point career, it was helpful to have had that mentorship experience. Aside from the beautifulness of me having a mentor who I really loved and was wonderful and fabulous as a person, I think some of the interactions and the structures were really helpful as I moved into that sort of next phase from a career perspective.
And if I can just add really quick, if you don't mind, Sarah, it just made me think, Point offers a lot of support, and it also asks of scholars in return. It asks us to meet certain challenges and to be part of community, right? And so having a mentor, especially like Timothy, is really helpful in that way as well, because it gives a level of personal accountability. There are however many dozens of Point scholars, and we might only interact with staff and board members in a very limited way over the course of our time as scholars. But having the one-to-one mentor relationship, I know, for instance, when we once developed annual community service projects, that's something that I know I could rely on Timothy for, not only for help in developing out the ideas, but also in accountability for the execution. So it represents an important dynamic with Point as an organization as well.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way, and I think that's a really good point. Johannes, I want to bring you into the conversation. What are your thoughts about the importance of it to Point?
Yeah, so I want to echo both of what you said. I think what comes to mind for me, honestly, is a little bit more kind of like fundamental to like the whole purpose of the Point Foundation. Just that, for a lot of us, the field that we're going into is just not very inclusive of LGBTQ people, if not like, pockets of it maybe like hostile. I think that a lot of like queer and trans people still have really negative experiences in healthcare settings, except in very like niche places like where I work, which is like an LGBT health center. And so it may be hard to find a mentor who's neutral, if not someone who is, actually supportive. And, I think that varies depending on what you're going into. But I think a lot of people, and, like in Star's bio and, through our conversations, both of us are interested in, working to reduce health disparities within our communities. And so that it's very difficult to find a place where you can actually do that work, especially not just because the medical profession is so broad, but because, again, queer people and people of color have been excluded from research and from leadership in those fields for a long time. And so, when some of us can start breaking into some of those fields, I think it's essential for us to reach back and help other people start making it into those fields. And take leadership and be able to like work on the things that we want to work on, because there's absolutely a need. We needed it growing up, and so I think we have to make it. We're still making it. And look, Star's here.
No, that's Star. We're so glad you can join us, and welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. So I won't put you on the spot. We're gonna go into our third question, and so you can kind of see we're just sort of organically answering these questions about mentorship, but are so glad you're here. So the third question I have for the panel is, what have you learned from your mentor, or what have you learned from being a mentor? And Johannes, I'm actually wondering if you could start us off with that question. So what have you learned?
So I have learned / was reminded of just how broad the nursing field is and how many different entryways people have into nursing. Because like I mentioned before, like I started out wanting to, well, I didn't mention this specifically, but I started out wanting to be like a therapist or get a psychology PhD as a route to being a therapist, because I was very interested in mental health. And I was, a psychology and gender studies double major in undergrad, and then worked doing research to prepare for like a PhD program for 5 years after that. And then kind of realized that I was missing doing sort of like face-to-face work with people and wanting to do, direct care for individuals and for populations. But essentially, like, that was a very long route to finding my way back to nursing. And so in STAR, correct me if I get any of these details wrong, but STAR works as an EMT and has done that for a while, and then started training EMTs. And so STAR has been like in the medical field for a long time, since like high school, essentially. And STAR is also like a triple major in like art and nursing and criminal justice. And so I think like I'm also at a point now where I've almost been an RN for 5 years. So I'm thinking about going back to school myself because I think I might want to get into mental health and become a psych NP. So talking to Star and looking at Star's path and all the different ways that she's navigating what her next steps are in her degree is just kind of like helping me like have a little bit of self-compassion for taking a little longer to figure out what I want to do, and B, just remind me that like there are so many things that I could do, and that there are a variety of my experience is pretty diverse, but that is like essential to being a nurse. So I think, it's been really helpful to be a mentor to someone who's just starting their nursing degree as I think about my next steps in my career.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I think it illustrates that mentorship isn't just a one-directional relationship, that you're learning from Star as much as Star might be gaining from that relationship too, which is beautiful. So Star, I didn't realize you're a triple major. So in your spare time, thank you for joining us. And I'm wondering if you want to speak to what you've learned from your mentor and that mentor relationship.
Crazily enough, I've learned more than I ever really thought I could have. And like, it's not even just like on a like professional level with like how I thought it would be like with someone who's also doing healthcare and everything like that. I feel like a huge part of what I learned was taking care of myself, because like just seeing how well he has been able to work through their own struggles and really like balanced life has been really important to me, because I never really knew how to do that. I didn't grow up in a family that also valued that as well. It was just you work and you work and you work and you find your way to this, and like you can stop working once you're proud of yourself, if that makes sense. So seeing that like positive outlook on life and understanding that like there is a journey there was something that was really hard for me to come to terms with. But I learned a lot of that from Johannes, and I really feel like that really was helpful. And like just being supported in the fact that I was going into a couple different things as I found my way towards my main goals, and the fact that like everything is so expansive and I felt safe in exploring that as I'm going into nursing has been one of the best things ever. Because like I can't tell you how many times I would walk into a counselor's office, explain what I was planning to do. Oh, I'd like to be a nurse practitioner focusing in family practice, so I can kind of have a wide range of things I can do, and I'd love criminal justice and everything, so I'd really appreciate if I can work that into it, because I know there's a shortage of nurses that are going into like people who process rape kits and stuff like that, who like work on the scenes of things like that, because they aren't full-time staff members, because we don't value that. And also the fact that there are so many people who are going through abuse of some sort, and most of them, if you look into statistics, are really like LGBT or people who are in those minorities that aren't being helped. So I was like, I want to do something like that. And the first thing they tell me is, you're not going to make it out of here if you have too many like goals or you have too many things you want to go into. Just pick something and go with it. But I've received so much support and so much like encouragement throughout this time that it really does make it feel like I have a support system. And I never really thought I would get that from being like, online and disconnected in the way it has been. And like even learning to take care of yourself as the EMT in the middle of COVID, that is the hardest thing you can really do, because you're sitting there watching everyone else thinking I have to be the hero, quote unquote, when in reality it's always about you can't help anyone if you're not able to help yourself. And being able to be supported in that way and understand taking care of myself, it's essential to anything really, especially now in COVID times when we thought this lasts a couple months and now it's 2 years going, and it's interesting. And I really appreciated learning that from him. It's the best thing ever.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. And then that absolutely goes both ways. Like, honestly, just talking to you about self-care and like just making sure that we touch on self-care every time we have a session together is just super important to me too, because like it is something that I still struggle with. I think our family experiences were very different, but I think I totally relate to what you're saying about like the expectations that come from family, you know, coming from like a first generation immigrant family from the Philippines, and also navigating just stressful family dynamics and having to set boundaries and take care of yourself within those dynamics, which I think is something that all people, but especially LGBTQ people, can relate to. I honestly, that is one of the most valuable things that we've talked about for me, Star, in our conversations. And so I want you to know that that has really had an impact on me too.
Thank you. That means a lot.
I didn't know I'd have to bring tissues to this, but it's special to just see the exchange in action. So thank you. So Tim, I'm going to call on you next. I know you are a mentor, but you have also had a mentor through Point. Do you want to share any lessons you've learned from those relationships?
I think, yeah, maybe a common theme or through line is like perspective. That when I was a scholar, I didn't grow up with, I have two lovely parents that I love and are great. They did not prepare me for a world, I'd say like a professional world, a world of like navigating college, a world of navigating law school. That just wasn't part of my upbringing. And so having a mentor through Point who understood what it was like to be gay, what it's like to be working through law school, what it's like to sort of manage those stresses, and to give me the space and sort of create perspective for me to be okay. I was talking to Kyle today, like I remember my first grade in law school was a C, and I was like, well, that's it. I'm done. I'm gonna fail out and I'm gonna lose my point scholarship, and that's it. And he was like, you need to take a breath. Like, this is not the end of the world. It's gonna be okay. And he, having him walk me through his own experience and giving me that perspective at that time was something I carry with me as something that was really, really meaningful, as having an adult in my life who didn't want or need anything from me other than to like help me get through and provide support and provide sort of unconditional caring. Like that's really special. And I think I bring that with me in my feeling that part of being a Point scholar and an alum of Point is carrying the desire primarily, but also the feeling that like this is something I need to also be doing because I received this support in the past, and it's something that I should be paying back to the community and to just sort of the organization generally. And so I think that also that spirit of community and wanting to repay what was given to me is something that is really valuable. And my hope is that as I'm working with Kyle and providing unconditional support to him and hopefully giving him the space to have the perspective like that whatever he is feeling at any given time, especially if it's a challenge, we can work through it. Like, there is a solution, and I will be here to help you find your path forward in that solution. And so that's something that I hope I can give to him, not just while we're matched as mentor and mentee, but just as a sort of lifelong friend.
Kyle,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of that. How do I echo that, right? I can think of, it's just such a similar example where in my very first semester as a Point Flagship scholar, I completely bombed finite math for like the fourth time. I'll be honest, like I have very good grades now, so I don't worry about like being honest about this kind of thing. And I remember the next check-in with Timothy, I was very upset about it. And, one thing about us that is different is that, I can kind of get lost in my own big, like abstract ideas about things. And Timothy's very practical. And so, after like listening to me and letting me have my feelings about this, perceived disaster that I had created, he said, what are we going to do about this? What are some steps that you can take to manage this situation? And he helped me, navigate arranging a tutor through Point Foundation, and help me stay accountable about study plans that I set for myself the following semester in our check-ins. And then in that spring that followed, I think I passed finite with a B or a B plus. So it really made a tangible difference to have someone who could just help me set some parameters around the problem and around what success could look like. And Timothy's been there for me with that kind of thing since I was trying to transfer from community college. So just the consistency of the support, you can learn so much from that, and I certainly have. And I look forward, also to, after I graduate, hopefully providing some of that mentorship to a future Point scholar. That kind of supportive community isn't something that most scholars that I found isn't something that we're used to receiving or being a part of, and to be able to look forward to it at this stage, it's unexpected and it's very nice.
Thank you all. It's just really rich information you're sharing, and two things I've heard. So number one, I think the ability to not feel isolated, whether we're people of color, we're first-gen college students, we just have received a grade that makes us self-conscious. We're not alone. And I think mentoring can be a buffer for some of those things that we're navigating. And so you all are illustrating that. I also think the idea that we're giving back, right? So we're receiving, but several of you have said, and part of why I'm motivated to continue to give back is what I've already received. And I certainly echo that with Point. I couldn't wait to volunteer as soon as I graduated. So I think Point somehow just sort of translates that spirit, particularly to the scholars that benefit from the program. So thank you for sharing. All right, so I think some of you have touched on this question already, but there might be more to say. So tell us why it's important to have a mentor from the LGBTQ community. Star, do you want to get us started with your thoughts?
Yeah, of course. I think the main thing is just being in the LGBTQ community is a very different experience than even being someone who's a minority. It's such a niche where a lot of people can accept you for everything else. Like for me, oh, you're a woman, you have one thing that's slightly against you. Okay, you're Black. Okay, well, that's a little bit more against you. And you can understand certain things, certain struggles that go along with that. But when it comes to being a mixture of all, or just being someone in the LGBTQ community, everyone has their own experience with that. And most of the time it's a combination of, oh, I had some accepting people, I had some interesting examples of way people treated me, and I also have really concerning things that added to the trauma of my life. And I feel like when it comes to that, it's always better when you have someone who's on that same page, especially when you're going into a scholarship that is kind of based in that. And having a mentor who's on the same page, it's really helpful, especially when they also work in a field where they're with people who are LGBTQ all the time. It's very, it's almost cathartic in a way, but it's also very affirming in yourself and how you can explore or what you're thinking, because I feel like it's always an ever-growing process being in the LGBTQ community, because there's so much to come to terms with, and it's not as simple as when you're heteronormative and you kind of just walk into a space and you're like, oh, I don't have to think about explaining myself or figuring out whether or not this is just a phase or this or that. And it's always going to be an evolving thing in your life, and just the way that you treat it with who you're around. So I feel like that helps to really navigate not only the physical and social conflicts that you may have, but also the ones within you, and trying to come to terms with that with someone who is also had lived through that life and understood how it can affect your schooling and just day-to-day things is really important in my book. And I found that for me, it helped me to feel more secure in who I was. And I didn't feel so afraid or I had to prove myself to be like, oh, I'm not crazy, I'm not this, I'm not that. And maybe that's the way I grew up, just feeling like I had to make sure that that was like said in there, that like I'm proud of who I am. But it creates a space within everything else that you have, and it gives you a common ground to start with. And I think at the end of the day, it's really difficult to have a mentorship or have a sort of like friendship or relationship with the people you're around if you don't have at least that common ground, especially when it's such a big focus.
Thank you, Star. Kyle, I'm going to pass it to you as a current scholar. Tell us why you think it's important to have a mentor from the LGBTQ community.
Absolutely. Well, I'll start by, by imagining, I suppose, what it would be like if like the converse was the case. It would be difficult for me, I think, to bond with, and it, frankly, it is difficult for me to bond with cishet people. Often, I'm someone who, my first job was in the LGBT community. I worked at a gay bar from the time that I was 19 to when I was maybe 24, and did a lot of community work after that besides. And so just having someone in my life who knows that community, but then to borrow words I think Johannes used in an earlier question, having someone that doesn't want anything from you or ask anything from you other than that relationship of accountability and support. As someone who was already navigating professional life as well when I became a Point Scholar, an experience that Timothy also had as a non-traditional student, it can be difficult to find those kinds of unasking professional support relationships, especially when you're navigating a small LGBT community as I am in Indianapolis. So it's just one of those things where I think about, I have a brother and two sisters, and we're all rather close in age, and they all have spouses and children, or almost children now, and my life is just quite different. So it's so important to have someone who understands that, and who is interested in your life, even though it doesn't fit necessarily the heteronormative mold, so to speak.
Thank you, Kyle. Johannes, do you have any thoughts about the importance of LGBTQ mentorship in particular?
Yeah, I think personally, I think a lot of us sort of, how do I put this? The experiences that we have growing up dealing with oppression as LGBTQ people, but also as Star was talking about, when we experience oppression intersectionally, whether that's also due to your class or your race or your gender, I think that just shapes so much of your worldview, and it really drives what you want to do with your life, and I think I absolutely want to become a nurse because of what my life was like growing up as a poor, queer Filipino person. And I think that, shapes how it shapes like the mental health struggles that I dealt with and my peers dealt with, because I did grow up with a lot of like LGBTQ folks around me. But we all dealt with like different levels of family rejection and family acceptance. It's kind of a weird scenario just growing up in New York City, where you go to high school and you can kind of be anonymous and independent from your family while you're in school and throughout the city. But then when you go home, it's like not as much of a safe space anymore. And so, yeah, I think like it's nice to be able to have a mentor with someone who knows what that's like, to know that like you're driven. And I think this isn't true for everybody necessarily, but for a lot of people, I think, who experience, intersectional forms of oppression, it really drives like our career goals and, the ways that we want to give back to the world. And so it's nice to like be able to have someone to talk to about that, where that's totally understood and not like questioned as being like a special interest or anything like that. I went through nursing school not really talking about, like, I almost like semi went back in the closet during nursing school, just because I was like, I'm here to like get my degree, because it was like not like a queer focused program. It's like a lot of my peers wouldn't understand LGBT health disparities. A lot of them didn't even understand, and this is like, the failing of like the nursing profession as a whole, but like, didn't like what it would need like a very basic like trans 101, for example, so, or like HIV 101. And it's like, it's nice to not have to explain that not have to be like the educator all the time. And so to have a mentor who already knows like what you're going through and can understand your passion and your interest more readily, I think is great. And I think that's part of what having an LGBT mentor provides.
Thank you. Tim, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this too.
I don't know that I have much more to add other than maybe to sort of like echo and amplify like this sense of assumed or implied trust and safety that comes with having an LGBTQ mentor. That I don't feel like I went into the relationship having to explain things. Like I could just talk, and to some extent my perspective was understood, and that is, I think, really special. And then I also think, you know, there is a need for us to be supporting and promoting each other in the fields in which we are working. And you know, we don't live in like this, like, you know, post discrimination or post LGBTQ isolation world, you know, even though the media sometimes I think paints that picture. And so making sure we're here for each other is like, I don't know, like blocking and tackling. Maybe that's a bad analogy or a bad example, but like it's just like getting down to the basics of like we still do have to protect and support and promote one another within the community. And so if there are mechanisms, if there are opportunities to create relationships where that is going to happen, then yeah, I'm going to participate in that. And so I think it's just a really important aspect.
Thank you. That's really so valuable. And I think, Johannes, what you said about not having to be the educator all the time, I just really felt that. And, not that there aren't, moments where there are differences between you and your mentor, but the relief of not, in Kyle, you too, not needing to show up in a particular way, but just to show up authentically with somebody that gets you and maybe gets to sort of just bear witness and support you and maybe hold you accountable when you need or when you want that. But the relief in those relationships, I think, is really important because you don't always have that outside of our bubble. So, all right, here's my final question for the panel. So how do you think networking in the LGBTQ community has or will benefit you in your career and your personal life? Johannes, would you get us started?
I had a feeling you were going to call me.
I
think this is my first
I'm
time
making eye contact with you on Zoom. I know you can see.
It's all good. Well, actually, it has absolutely directly benefited me. I have my job currently through networking. I moved to Chicago knowing that I wanted to work at Howard Brown because it's like the biggest LGBT health center in the Midwest. It's the only thing I want to, as a nurse, I wanted to do LGBT health. And so, me and my partner at the time were like, we're going to go to Chicago and we're going to make this happen. And I met someone who worked at Howard Brown from a previous visit to Chicago and told them that I was interested in applying. And then I posted on Chicago Career Exchange Facebook group saying like, hey, I'm a nurse in the city. I'm a new nurse. I'm looking for jobs in LGBT health. If anyone knows anyone who works at Howard Brown, that would be great. And then someone messaged me off of Facebook and said, hey, we're looking for someone. And then we direct messaged a little bit and I got an interview shortly after that. So literally networking is super important. It's how most people get jobs, I think. And so I think Point is really, it's just great that we're intentionally creating a network of queer people across the country in a variety of different fields where we can support each other that way, because we are still excluded from a lot of fields. There is still a lot of employment discrimination, especially when you are multiply marginalized. And so I think it's, that's one of the great things that we're doing here is it is a form of community care. And, we're supporting each other into getting into our passions. And yeah, I relied on the kindness of queer strangers in a new city to help me find this job, and it worked. And so why rely on strangers when you've got Point?
That sounds very quotable. Hope somebody wrote that down. Star, do you want to go next? So again, the role of networking.
I actually have a really similar experience to that of Johannes. I switched from being an EMT pretty recently, I think about 2 months ago, to working in the surgical field, helping set up orthopedic surgery trays and equipment, all that stuff, and like working hand in hand with representatives and doctors. There's between the hospital and like basically the warehouse. And I actually was only able to find out about that job because of a coworker I had when I was EMT. She was one of my partners. There's that we spent pretty much 12 hours or 24 hours a day with multiple times a week. And she and I would always talk about the fact that our field is so white male dominated. Like it was pretty much the people who were stepping up to go and be firefighters were pretty much all we worked with. And I was the only Black woman I ever met in the entirety of my company, over working in LA County, San Diego County, San Bernardino County. And there was like no one that I actually met like me. And it was almost as rare, if not more, to actually find someone who's LGBTQ. And I just got lucky enough that one of my partners was. And she actually, I told her I was looking for a new spot to go to so I could navigate nursing school easier and not be held over for like 48-hour shifts. And she told me that she actually knew of the job I'm currently working at. And she was like, oh, well, it's all people of color who work there, and they're all super accepting. And there's a huge range of people who work there, age and everything. And like half the people there, if they may not tell you right off the bat, but they actually are LGBTQ as well. And like, I remember the first time that I walked into my workplace, my boss was like, hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. So like, we're gonna do orientation stuff, but I usually send out a company-wide email, well, just introducing you to everyone. And I was like, oh, awesome. And he was like, okay, so is there anything in particular you'd like to mention? He's like, well, I know that like my friend Gabby, she told me about this and that and that. Do you have any special people you'd like me to mention? Is there anything you want to share? And I was like, well, I would love to share that I'm LGBTQ, but quite honestly, I'm terrified. I've never been in a space where I could openly be like that, especially professionally, and still be seen as professional. And he was like, no, if anyone gives you any problems, they won't even be here. That's how this company works. And I was like, what? And the first thing he said was like, yeah, no, anyone who doesn't respect each other or understand that there's other people around you who or value you for your differences isn't someone we want working here. So let me know. And this is the first place I've openly felt okay being myself. And the only way I ended up in a job like that, especially in healthcare, where everything's so like white male dominated, it was like terrifying to actually like have like a place I could be and not like second guess myself. And I feel like I would have never had that if I hadn't taken a chance and had those conversations and looked towards people who were also LGBTQ, who were trying to navigate such a male or white dominated like area of like work. And I just got really lucky that I was able to be respected and have that same thing and not have to prove myself. And like to such an extent that I felt like I never belonged, because that imposter syndrome could be very rampant. And just the support I got from networking with those people was immense.
Perfect, thank you. And that's something I hadn't heard people mention quite yet, was the imposter syndrome and how mentorship and networking can help you navigate that. So Star, thank you for bringing that up. So that's real. All right, Tim, what are your thoughts on the importance of networking and how it has or will benefit you in your career or personal life?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all agree it's important. Personally, I became introduced to Point because of networking within the LGBT community here in Chicago. Johannes Adams, who is on the emeritus board of Point, was very involved in Point. At the local level, I knew her through community service and volunteer work here. And when she found out that I was going to law school, she asked if I had applied to the Point Foundation. I had no idea what she was talking about. And so, I think having a community where you can share the things that you're striving towards, the goals that you have, and just like voicing them. It's not something I'm necessarily good at, is voicing, being aspirational and saying it out loud, because it can make it real and make it scary. So I think creating space to say those things, like these are the things I'm working towards, and these are the things I want, and to have a community that is there to say, oh, I can help you with part of that. Are you aware of A, B, and C? I think networking is just invaluable. And so I'm thankful to Anne. I'm thankful to her for introducing me to Point. And I'm thankful that Point gave me a mentor and allows me to be a mentor. I think it's just a beautiful thing all around.
Great. And Kyle, what are your thoughts as we look to close out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, very similar experience. I had been aware of the Point Flagship Scholarship from the time that I graduated high school, and I was like, yeah, that's great. I'm never gonna be a competitive candidate for that. But it was a mentor in the LGBT community. I keep wanting to say at home in Indianapolis. I'm at a semester away in DC now. Someone in the community in Indianapolis who in the second year of the community college program sent that to me and said, we've worked together before. I think you would be a great fit for this. And without that nudge, even if I'd found it on my own, I sincerely doubt that I would have applied. And so that's a way that a network can be useful, is providing that professional encouragement. And then, as I mentioned, I'm at a semester away in DC now. After the panel tonight, I've got a call with a community member in the area that Point has helped connect me with because I'm hunting for an internship. And so, I'm hoping for a productive and hopefully mutually supportive professional relationship in the LGBT community here in DC because of the connections that I've brought with me from Point Foundation. So definitely important to strengthen that nationwide network of LGBT communities that we've got going here, and certainly a lot of personal benefits for all of us as well.
Thank you, Kyle. That's wonderful. And best of luck in your semester abroad as well. The only thing I'll add as a former Point scholar who can definitely relate to Kyle's point of like, I'm just going to apply to Point. There's no way this will happen. So, okay, let's put it out there. And so grateful. I mean, it really changed my life. Is how much I learned about networking from other Point scholars and having the opportunity to interact with board members and Point staff. So I would say, for me, growing up in a very rural part of the country, I graduated with 35 kids in my high school and then moved to Alabama and Mississippi. I wouldn't say I got a lot of support around networking, but it was Point that really helped me. I got to watch people that, I thought were like doing it so much better than I was and making those connections. And so I think, being a part of the Point family, I think for me has really helped to grow my networks and still does. I mean, the events like this tonight are just a great opportunity to make those connections. So. All right, thank you, panelists. I'm going to turn it over to David, who I think is going to close us out. But thank you, panelists, for your input.
Hi, everyone, again, and thank you. Yes, before I wrap things up, I do want to mention that I think we got one question through the chat box that came to us directly. And as you can see, we're kind of out of time. So we're going to get an answer for you and send it to you via email. So look for that in the coming days. But I want to say thank you, of course, to Star, to Johannes, Kyle, and Tim for sharing your stories, sharing your experiences this evening. Those of us on staff at Point hear often that as important as the financial support is, that these partnerships, these relationships between mentorship and mentee are more important very often. They're part of what makes Point so special. So thank you for reminding us why that is. Thank you also to Sarah for moderating this evening's discussion. Thank you to our Board of Trustees and to our Board of Directors for everything you do to keep Point's work going and for making these mentorships possible. Lastly, big props and thanks to Nicole Rizzuto, who works many hours to make showcases like this happen. So thank you, Nicole. As a reminder to the members of the Board of Trustees and the Board of Directors, your work is so incredibly important, of course, and you see it in the results. This academic year, we are supporting the largest group of Point scholars ever at 389 all across the country. And in fact, we just announced our newest cohort of BIPOC scholars yesterday. So with that in mind, please be sure, if you're not doing this already, to follow us on social media to learn more about our scholars and alums by searching @Point Foundation on any of the social media channels. With that, thank you again for your support. Happy National Mentoring Month and have a great evening.